If you want to know what the Stroop effect is and what it has to do with the prefrontal cortex, then just stay right here because that is exactly what we're going to talk about in this video. Hi, my name is Lysandra Garcia and I'm an integrated developmental and educational specialist, and my focus is helping you reverse the learning and behavior challenges of yourself, your students, or your child. First, please hit the subscribe button so you'll be the first to know when I post my new videos. In the previous video, we talked about the prefrontal cortex. So if you want to go back to that if you want to know a little bit more. But it's this front area of the brain, and its role is in executive functioning. So today we're going to unpack it just a little bit deeper. The prefrontal cortex, particularly the frontal lobe, is associated with executive functions, which are a set of higher order cognitive processes that help individuals plan, organize, initiate, monitor, and control their thoughts and actions. The executive functions play a crucial role in goal-directed behavior and decision-making, problem-solving, self-regulation. The prefrontal cortex, located at the front of the brain, is especially involved in orchestrating these complex processes. And here are some components of the executive functions and the role of the prefrontal cortex. So we have things like working memory and inhibition, cognitive flexibility, planning and organization, problem solving, decision making, emotional regulation, goal setting, and monitoring, and interoception. And we'll talk about each one of those. And so I don't know if any of you are familiar with the marshmallow study. The marshmallow study is a study with 5-year-olds. So if you can imagine, so your frontal cortex is the last part of your brain to fully mature. So those of you who have teenage children might realize, especially boys, that they don't really have much of a developed prefrontal cortex. In fact, it doesn't fully mature until about 25. Boys is longer than girls, as you probably are well aware. So just getting something straightened out here for a second. Okay. Anyway, the marshmallow study was a study that what they did is they put out, they offered a marshmallow to a 5-year-old, and they told the 5-year-old, you could either eat this marshmallow now, or if you wait 10 minutes, or maybe it was 5 minutes, it was actually not that long, 5 or 10 minutes, then you would be able to eat too. And they were able actually to predict kind of long-term function of these children by if they were able to do delayed gratification with the marshmallow. And so that would be, kind of part of this whole thing that we're talking about. And so of course you can imagine some kids just grabbing the marshmallow, they don't care. And some are like, yeah, I can wait 10 minutes and then I can have more. Like, that's more of a planning kind of thinking ahead type thing. Those skills come into play when it comes like to risk taking, right? So you're like, if I do this, then I can do this, and I do this, and I do this, and this will happen, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. We had a DARE officer come to our school one time, and they had this big jug of these like little candies, these like little white candies, and there were 2 red ones. And then they said, okay, so obviously they were pretending, but like these 2 red ones were the poisonous ones. They were in there somewhere. So like who would be willing to take one to eat out of the bucket? So there were hundreds of white ones and 2 red ones. But of course, like all the boys, especially in the, I was in the inner city and stuff, all the boys were like, I'll do it. And the girls were quite more cautious about it. Some I think were okay, but most of the girls were like more cautious. Anyway, so working memory, we talked about before, but the prefrontal cortex is heavily involved in working memory. It's the ability to temporarily hold and manipulate information for cognitive tasks It allows individuals to update, revise, and use information actively. So, for example, if you're solving a complex math problem, the prefrontal cortex helps in holding and manipulating the numbers and operations in your mind. Inhibition is suppressing irrelevant or distracting information and impulses. So you can see this is a problem with ADHD or ADD. The prefrontal cortex helps in controlling impulsive behaviors and resisting distractions. So, for example, resisting the urge to check your phone during a meeting or refraining from interruptions, interrupting somebody while they speak. Cognitive flexibility, it allows individuals to adapt their thinking and shift between different tasks or mental sets. The prefrontal cortex is crucial for switching between strategies or perspectives. So, for example, changing your approach when you're faced with a new problem or adjusting a change in plans. And then we have planning and organization. That the prefrontal cortex is instrumental in planning and organizing tasks, breaking them down into steps, and setting priorities. For example, planning a project by outlining tasks, allocating resources, and establishing timelines. So problem solving, the role is like the executive functions guided by the prefrontal cortex contribute to executive problem solving by analyzing the situations, generating solutions, and evaluating their outcomes. For example, finding innovative solutions to challenge at work or in personal life. Decision making, the prefrontal cortex works by weighing the options, considering consequences like we were talking about, and selecting the most appropriate course of action. So, for example, choosing between job offers or considering factors like salary, location, and career advancement, right? Not just like impulsively going for the first one that comes. Emotional regulation and executive functions help regulate and manage emotions, which allow individuals to control emotional responses and make decisions more rationally. For example, remaining calm under pressure or refraining from impulsive emotional reactions. Goal setting and monitoring. The prefrontal cortex assists in setting goals, creating plans to achieve them, and monitor the progress towards those goals, like setting a fitness goal, creating a workout plan, and tracking your achievements. Interoception is something you probably haven't heard of, and that is the way we perceive our own body, and that is in the dorsolateral area of the prefrontal cortex. But interoception in perceiving our body, so if you notice like people or kids especially, or like autistic kids who have low body awareness, I mean, that can be proprioceptive, but it's also interoception. They just don't have good body awareness. Let's say awareness of, when you're hungry, or even like, the inner feelings of your body. The prefrontal cortex matures gradually throughout childhood and adolescence, with executive functions continuing to develop early into adulthood. Disruptions in the prefrontal cortex, such as with injury or neurological conditions, that can impact executive functioning and lead to difficulties in various cognitive and behavioral areas. Some things that impair the prefrontal cortex, alcohol, that affects the GABA. So we have that's a neurotransmitter, a calming neurotransmitter. So if you alcohol is one of the most dangerous things to go cold turkey on if you're addicted to alcohol. So because it affects the GABA neurotransmitters, so it can cause seizures, or people can even die from it. Chronic stress also impairs it. When you're in stress, you reduce the blood flow to that area of the brain, because when you're in that sympathetic fight or flight, you want all the blood flow to go to the areas that is ready to fight or to flight, but you're working out of your, basically your brainstem, your automatic areas, and not your rational thinking areas. in drug addiction, other addictions like porn, concussions and TBI, lack of sleep, and lack of sunlight. Okay, so if you're having an issue and you notice that you're inside all the time, you might want to make sure you're getting some sun. Sunlight is very, very important. We saw in an earlier video that there is this inverse relationship between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. So if you want to down regulate the amygdala, you know, that's always calling out danger, then you need to activate that prefrontal cortex in order to downregulate. So it kind of works like this. If the brain feels safer, it will also take us out of that tendon guard reflex. That's where there's tense muscle tone in the back of the back and the back of the leg, and we're on like edge like this. That's the tendon guard. Being a toe walker is part of that. Probably the best way to engage in activities is through play and keeping it fun. Okay, so whenever, especially when we're working with kids, we want to be you know, doing this through play. Otherwise, especially kids, they're going to think that everything's boring or it's hard or work or whatever. So just think about how can we do this through play. So some ways to train the prefrontal cortex through cognitive tasks, strength training, and movement. Okay, so believe it or not, so when you're doing strength training, you are working on the prefrontal cortex. Meditation and mindfulness, interoception training, because you are like inhibiting trying to think about other things, and you're really focusing on your breathing and your, you know, just your body in general, how you feel, how you're in perceiving the different parts of your body. And vision training, because there are parts of our vision systems, as we saw in an earlier video, is actually parts of them is up here in the prefrontal cortex. Parts of we have our visual cortex in the back that interprets what we see, but certain visual activities are up in the frontal lobe. So when we do eye tracking movements where we're moving our eyes back, you know, from one side to the other, that actually helps down regulate the amygdala because we're upregulating the prefrontal cortex. So the inhibition is one of the keys for the prefrontal cortex to strengthen, and the Stroop Effect is developed by Ridley Stroop in the 1930s. It's a great drill for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be showing you the names of colors, and they will be in different colors. So for the example, the word red might be in yellow. Okay, I'm back in just a second. All right, so I want you to think about how that was and which one was harder for you. They say that I've read that if you if you're more easily able to identify the color, then that's more of a right brain activity. If you can more easily identify the word and like able to like take out the distraction of the color, then that's a little bit more left brains. But either way, it's the ability to ignore the other distraction. Okay, another good task is the digit span forward and backward. We've talked about this a few times. Listen to a string of numbers and try to recite them forward or backwards. Obviously, it's easier to recite them in the direction it was given to you. Being able to recite them backwards is more complicated, so you might only be able to do 4 numbers instead of 6. If you're doing this yourself, just try looking at the numbers for a few seconds and then recite them without looking. And that's different too. If someone says it, it's an auditory input. And if you're just looking and then closing them, that's visual. Some people are better with the auditory, some people are better with the visual. So if you were going to do this as practice or a drill, you could work on both, but you would probably work more on the one that was more challenging for you. Okay, if you liked today's episode and are interested in learning more about how to support brain function, then download my ebook, How to Regain Control of Your Metabolism, Mood, and Mind. And also, let me know. You can just contact me directly if you're interested in something like a brain gym course or a primitive reflex integration course. Or some other kind of training, or if you have something that you would really like to know, just let me know, send me a message, and I will create a video about that. Okay, until next time, my videos come out on Monday, my tips and tricks come out on Wednesday, and I will see you in the next video.